Imagine this. You wake up, follow your routine, act, react, think, believe, doubt, fear. But have you ever paused long enough to ask, who taught me to be this way? Is this truly me? Or am I living out scripts written by childhood wounds, cultural expectations, or the unresolved conflicts of my parents? According to Jung, most people spend their entire lives avoiding this question. They build an identity around what is accepted, what is safe, what makes sense for the world around them, but not around what is true. And when you live disconnected from truth, a strange emptiness follows you everywhere. Maybe you know that feeling, a subtle sense that something is missing, that you should be more, that you should be somewhere else, doing something else. Jung says that this emptiness is not a flaw, it is a message. Today we will dive deep into something brutally clear, the meaning of your life, not the romanticized version. Not cliches about purpose, but a direct, sharp, and uncomfortable analysis, guided by Jung's psychology. And among all the insights we will explore, the final one will be the most powerful, the kind that can genuinely shift the direction of your existence. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, comment your reflections, and share this video, because the ideas we will explore here are not superficial. They have the potential to change the way you see yourself, your decisions, and your entire life journey. And I promise, the revelations ahead will challenge everything you assume about meaning and purpose. Now, let me tell you something that'll make you deeply uncomfortable. You are not looking for the meaning of your life. You are looking for permission to stop feeling guilty about the life you're already living. Read that again. Let it sting. Because here's what nobody wants to admit when you say you're searching for meaning. What you're really saying is, I need a story that makes my suffering justified. I need a narrative that explains why I feel this emptiness. I need a framework that tells me I'm on a path, even if I'm standing completely still. You're not seeking truth. You're seeking comfort that looks like truth. Jung understood this with devastating clarity. He watched patients come to him year after year, asking the same question in different words. What is my purpose? And what he saw beneath that question was something far darker, a desperate plea to be told that their current state of psychological imprisonment was somehow noble, necessary, part of some grand design. They didn't want liberation. They wanted their chains explained to them in a way that made them bearable. This is the real trap. Not that you lack meaning, but that you've been taught to believe meaning is something external, something to be found, discovered, earned, achieved. So you search, you read books, you take course, you meditate, you journal, you set intentions. And with each new practice, each new philosophy, you feel a brief surge of hope. Finally, you think, this is it. This is the answer. Until it isn't. And then you're back where you started, scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m., that same hollow feeling in your chest, wondering why nothing ever quite fills the void. But here's what Jung would tell you if he were sitting across from you right now. The void is not the problem. Your refusal to enter it is. Think about how you spend your days. Every single choice you make is designed to avoid confronting the one question that terrifies you most. What if I remove all the distractions, all the identities, all the roles I play? What if I strip away everything I use to define myself and discover there's nothing underneath? What if I'm empty all the way down? This fear is so primal, so existentially threatening, that you've built an entire personality structure to never have to face it. You've convinced yourself that you're a professional, a parent, a partner, a person with hobbies and interests and opinions. You've accumulated credentials, relationships, possessions, all of them serving as evidence that you exist, that you matter, that your life means something. But late at night, when the distractions fade and you're alone with your thoughts, you feel it, don't you? That creeping suspicion that you're performing a role written by someone else, that every choice you've made, your career, your relationships, even your deepest convictions might not actually be yours at all. They might be elaborate defense mechanisms constructed by a child who learned very early that authenticity was dangerous, that showing your true self led to rejection, abandonment, or punishment. So you learned to hide, not consciously, not deliberately, but deeply, systematically, automatically. You learned which parts of yourself were acceptable and which had to be buried. You learned which emotions could be expressed and which had to be locked away. You learned which desires were permitted and which had to be denied. And over the years, this process became so complete, so total, that you forgot you were even doing it. Now you walk through life wearing a mask so convincing that you've mistaken it for your face. You've been playing a character so long that you've forgotten it's a performance. And the meaning you're searching for? It's not hiding out there in the world. It's trapped behind that mask, suffocating, desperate to be seen. Jung called this the persona, the social face you present to the world. And he was absolutely clear about this. The more attached you are to your persona, the more meaningless your life will feel. Because meaning doesn't come from the roles you play. It comes from the reality you've been avoiding beneath those roles. Here's the part that makes this truly dangerous. You can spend your entire life optimizing your persona and call it growth. You can switch careers, change cities, end relationships, start new ones, and all of it can be just rearranging the furniture in the same psychological prison. The bars never move. The strings never break. You just tell yourself a better story about why you're trapped. And this is where most people stop. They reach this uncomfortable realization, feel the weight of it for a moment, and then immediately reach for another distraction, another solution, another practice that promises transformation without requiring them to actually dismantle anything. They want enlightenment that doesn't hurt. They want authenticity that doesn't cost them their comfort. They want meaning that doesn't demand they face what they've spent decades running from. But Jung offers no such escape. He says, your life will remain meaningless until you stop lying to yourself about who you are. Not who you wish you were. Not who you're trying to become. Who you actually are right now. Beneath the performance, beneath the fear, beneath every story you've ever told yourself to make your existence tolerable. And the reason this matters, the reason this is worth confronting, is because on the other side of that confrontation is something you've never experienced. Freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want. The freedom to be who you actually are, without needing anyone's permission, without needing any external validation, without needing meaning to be delivered to you like a prize. What comes next will show you exactly what's been controlling you from the shadows, and why every attempt you've made to escape it has only tightened its grip. You think you're making choices. That's the first lie you need to confront. Every morning you wake up believing you're the author of your own life. That the decisions flowing through your day are yours. What to eat, what to wear, what to say, who to trust, what to pursue. But Jung spent his entire career documenting a truth so unsettling that most people reject it immediately. You are not making most of your decisions. Something else is making them for you. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. There are forces operating inside your psyche right now, ancient, powerful, completely invisible to your conscious awareness, that are steering your life with more authority than you've ever had over yourself. And the reason you can't see them is because they operate in the territory Jung called the unconscious. This isn't some mystical concept. It's psychological fact. Your unconscious mind is vastly larger than your conscious awareness, and it's been programmed since birth by experiences you can't remember, patterns you never chose, and wounds you've spent your entire life trying to forget. Think about this carefully. When you were a child, you had no defenses. Your psyche was completely open, absorbing everything the way your mother looked at you when you cried, the tone in your father's voice when he was disappointed, the silence at the dinner table, the things that made adults withdraw their love, the behaviors that earned approval. And from these thousands of tiny interactions, your unconscious constructed a survival manual, rules about what's safe and what's dangerous. Instructions about who you need to be to avoid pain and secure love. These rules are still running, right now, this moment. They're why you shrink in certain situations even though you consciously want to speak up. They're why you sabotage opportunities even though you consciously want to succeed. They're why you choose partners who hurt you in familiar ways. They're why certain emotions feel completely inaccessible while others overwhelm you without warning. Your unconscious learned what kept you safe when you were powerless, and it's still following those instructions decades later, even though the original threats no longer exist. Jung called this the complex, a cluster of unconscious associations, emotions, and memories that gets triggered by present circumstances and hijacks your behavior. You think you're responding to what's actually happening, but you're not. You're responding to what happened 20 years ago. You're reacting to ghosts. Consider the person who was criticized harshly as a child. Their unconscious learned, Visibility equals danger. Being seen means being attacked. Now, as an adult, whenever they're about to step into visibility, give a presentation, share creative work, express a strong opinion, their unconscious activates the ancient survival program. Anxiety floods their body. Their mind goes blank. They suddenly find compelling reasons why this isn't the right time. They're not being cowardly. They're being controlled by a part of themselves that's still trying to protect the vulnerable child they once were. Or consider the person who experienced abandonment. Their unconscious learned attachment equals loss. Needing someone means they'll leave. Now every relationship follows the same script. They either choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, unconsciously ensuring they never risk real intimacy, or they become so clingy and anxious that they push away the very connection they desperately want. They're not being irrational. They're being controlled by an unconscious program that equates love with inevitable abandonment. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Every bad luck story you tell yourself, every pattern you can't seem to break, every time you wonder why you keep ending up in the same situation with different people, it's not fate. It's your unconscious running the same program over and over, trying to resolve wounds that were never healed, trying to master situations where you once felt powerless. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Your unconscious isn't just running programs from your own childhood. According to Jung, you've also inherited psychological patterns from your ancestors, what he called the collective unconscious. Fears, instincts, archetypes, and behavioral templates that have been passed down through generations. Your grandmother's unprocessed trauma, your grandfather's suppressed rage, your family's unspoken rules about money, about ambition, about what's possible for people like us. You think your fear of failure is personal? Look deeper. It might be 3 generations of poverty trauma encoded in your nervous system. You think your relationship patterns are just bad luck? Look deeper. You might be unconsciously recreating your parents' marriage, trying to resolve their conflicts through your own partnerships. You think your career dissatisfaction is about finding the right job? Look deeper. You might be living out your father's abandoned dreams or your mother's suppressed ambitions, sacrificing your own authenticity to complete someone else's unlived life. This is the hidden problem Jung devoted his life to exposing. Most people are living scripts they never wrote. They're performing roles assigned by family systems, cultural conditioning, and unconscious inheritance. And because they're not aware of it, they can't change it. They just keep repeating, wondering why life feels so empty, why meaning remains so elusive. This is the machinery of your psychological imprisonment. Layer upon layer of unconscious programming, each one installed to keep you safe, but now keeping you trapped. Your persona, the socially acceptable mask you show the world. Your complexes, the emotional landmines that hijack your behavior. Your shadow, the denied parts of yourself that control you from the darkness. Your collective inheritance, the ancestral patterns you never chose but carry anyway. And all of it operates below your awareness, making choices for you, generating feelings you can't explain, pushing you toward certain people and away from others, sabotaging your conscious intentions, while you wonder why you keep failing at the very things you claim to want most. The meaning you're searching for? It can't emerge while these unconscious forces are in control, because meaning requires consciousness. It requires actually seeing what's happening inside you. It requires distinguishing between your authentic voice and the chorus of inherited voices that have colonized your inner world. Jung was absolutely clear about this. You cannot find meaning while you're asleep, and most people are asleep. Walking, talking, working, loving, all while completely unconscious of the forces actually running their lives. They mistake the puppet show for reality. They think the strings are their own choices. But every now and then, something breaks through. A crisis, a loss, a moment of such stark clarity that the machinery becomes briefly visible. And in that moment, you catch a glimpse of what's really been happening. You see the pattern. You recognize the script. You feel the strings. And once you see it, you can never fully unsee it. The question becomes, will you go back to sleep? Will you let the comfortable numbness return? Or will you do the terrifying work of staying awake long enough to understand what's actually controlling you? What comes next will show you the catastrophic price you pay for remaining unconscious and why most people choose to pay it rather than face what Jung demands you confront. Here's what nobody tells you about living unconsciously. The price isn't dramatic, it's cumulative. You don't wake up one day to discover your life has been stolen. It disappears slowly, quietly, one compromised choice at a time, until you look around and realize you've spent decades building a life that belongs to someone else. Think about the way you make decisions, not the big, obvious ones, those you deliberate over, analyze, discuss with others. I'm talking about the thousands of micro-choices that actually constitute your existence. The conversation you didn't have because something inside you whispered, "Dangerous." The creative project you abandoned because a voice you don't recognize said, "Who do you think you are?" The relationship you stayed in years too long because leaving would require admitting you were wrong. The job that slowly drained your aliveness because the alternative felt too uncertain. These aren't conscious choices, they're unconscious programs executing themselves. And every time one of these programs runs without your awareness, a piece of your authentic life gets traded for safety, for approval, for the comfort of remaining who you've always been. Jung called this psychological stagnation. And he insisted it was the primary source of human misery. Not poverty, not illness, not even loss, but the slow suffocation that comes from refusing to grow, from clinging to outdated versions of yourself because evolution requires confronting what you've been avoiding. Your psyche is designed to develop. It has a natural trajectory toward wholeness, toward integration, toward becoming fully yourself. But this process only happens if you participate in it. If you don't, if you keep running the same unconscious programs, avoiding the same uncomfortable truths, hiding behind the same defensive strategies, your psyche doesn't just stop developing, it begins to rot. This is what creates that feeling you know so well, that low-grade depression that isn't quite bad enough to address but never quite goes away. That pervasive sense that life is happening to other people while you're watching from behind glass. That creeping suspicion that you're wasting something precious, burning through years without ever really living them. This is the unseen consequence of unconscious living. You don't just lose your authentic self, you become complicit in its murder. Every time you silence your real desires to preserve your image, every time you suppress your genuine response to maintain harmony, every time you tell yourself that later, after this promotion, after the kids grow up, after retirement, then you'll finally live authentically. You're participating in your own erasure. And your body knows. This is crucial to understand. Your unconscious mind communicates through your physical being when you won't listen to its psychological messages. The chronic tension in your shoulders isn't just stress. It's the weight of carrying identities that aren't yours. The exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes isn't just fatigue. It's the energy drain of maintaining performances you were never meant to sustain. The anxiety that appears without clear cause isn't random. It's your psyche's alarm system screaming that you're living out of alignment with your nature. And here's the most insidious part. Your unconscious programs are self-reinforcing. They don't just influence your choices, they shape what you're able to perceive. If you have an unconscious belief that you're unlovable, you literally won't be able to see evidence of people loving you. Your perception will filter it out, reinterpret it, find reasons why it doesn't count. If you have an unconscious conviction that success isn't for people like you, opportunities will appear, and you won't recognize them as opportunities. You'll see obstacles, complications, reasons why it won't work. This is why positive thinking doesn't work, why affirmations feel hollow, why you can consciously want something desperately and still sabotage it. Because your unconscious programs override your conscious intentions every time. You can't think your way out of unconscious patterns. You have to become conscious of them first. Jung was brutally clear about this. What you are not conscious of controls, you absolutely. Not partially, not sometimes. Absolutely. Until you drag it into awareness, name it, understand its origins, and consciously decide whether to keep it or release it, you are not free. You are a puppet, believing itself to be a person, and the cruelest part? Most people live their entire lives this way. They die without ever waking up, without ever seeing the strings, without ever asking whether the voice in their head giving them instructions is actually theirs or just the echo of every authority figure who ever had power over them. They call this a life, but Jung would say it's a kind of death, a slow, comfortable death, where your body continues functioning but your soul never gets to exist. This is the unseen consequence. Not that you fail, not that you suffer, but that you spend your one existence, your single, irreplaceable chance at consciousness running programs written by people who are already dead, living out scripts that were never yours, dying without ever having truly lived. And what comes next is the rebellion against this fate, the way out, the path Jung carved through the darkness. But I'll warn you now, it requires something most people will never give. It requires you to stop being comfortable with your own dishonesty, to stop protecting the lies you've told yourself, to stop choosing the familiar prison over the terrifying freedom of actually becoming real. Are you ready for that? Because once you start, there's no going back to sleep. You've been taught to believe that freedom is something you earn, that if you work hard enough, achieve enough, optimize enough, you'll eventually arrive at some psychological promised land where everything makes sense and the emptiness finally stops following you. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. Freedom doesn't come from addition. It comes from subtraction. Every system you've tried, every self-help framework, every productivity method, every spiritual practice has been adding more layers to your identity, more concepts to memorize, more behaviors to perform, more ideals to chase. And with each new layer, you've moved further away from the truth of who you are. You've been building a prison and calling it personal development. The rebellion Jung demands is the opposite of everything you've been conditioned to do. It's not about becoming more. It's about stripping away everything that isn't actually you. And this process, this confrontation with your own psychological architecture, requires a kind of courage most people will never find. Because what you're really being asked to do is commit a kind of psychological suicide, to kill the version of yourself that has kept you safe, that has earned you approval, that has helped you survive in a world that punishes authenticity. You're being asked to look at the persona you've spent decades perfecting and admit, this is not me. This has never been me. I have been performing a role so convincingly that I forgot I was acting. Think about the parts of yourself you've buried, not the surface level stuff everyone knows. They have flaws they hide. I'm talking about the deep denials, the talents you've suppressed because they didn't fit your family's expectations, the desires you've crushed because they seemed selfish or unrealistic, the anger you've swallowed year after year because you learned that expressing it meant losing love, the wildness, the creativity, the raw aliveness you felt as a child before the world taught you to sit still, be quiet, and conform. Jung called these rejected parts the shadow, and he was brutally clear about this. Whatever you refuse to acknowledge about yourself doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It hides in your unconscious. And from there, it controls your entire life. Every inexplicable mood swing, every relationship that explodes the same way, every self-sabotaging behavior, every time you say you'll do something and then mysteriously don't. Your shadow is running the show. So the rebellion begins with a simple but devastating question. What am I afraid to admit about myself? Not what you're afraid others will think. What you're afraid to admit to yourself. Because the real terror isn't external judgment. It's internal confrontation. It's looking directly at the parts of yourself you've spent your whole life pretending don't exist and saying, this is also me. This darkness, this rage, this neediness, this ambition, this hunger, this is also who I am. Most people recoil from this moment. They'd rather maintain the illusion of being good, balanced, enlightened. They'd rather keep the shadow locked away and pretend they've transcended it. But Jung would tell you, integration is not transcendence. You don't rise above your darkness. You absorb it. You own it. You stop running from it and start using its energy consciously. This is where real power emerges. Not the manufactured confidence of positive thinking, but the deep, unshakable authority that comes from knowing yourself completely light and shadow, strength and weakness, nobility and pettiness, and no longer needing to hide any of it. Let me show you what this looks like practically. Consider the person who spends their life being nice, always accommodating, always agreeable, never causing conflict. They pride themselves on being kind, understanding, easy to get along with. But beneath that niceness is a shadow they refuse to see. Rage. Years of suppressed anger at being taken advantage of. Decades of swallowed resentment at having their boundaries violated. And because they refuse to acknowledge this rage, It leaks out sideways, passive aggression, chronic exhaustion, sudden unexplainable breakdowns. Or worst of all, they unconsciously attract situations that justify their hidden anger. The rebellion for this person isn't to become angry, it's to admit they already are. To stop performing niceness and start expressing genuine boundaries. To integrate their aggression instead of denying it. And when they do this, when they finally stop lying about who they are, something miraculous happens. They don't become cruel, they become real. And real connection, real respect, real meaning only emerge when you stop performing and start existing. Or consider the person who's built their entire identity around being rational, logical, controlled. They mock emotion as weakness. They pride themselves on being above such messy human feelings, but their shadow is drowning in everything they've denied: vulnerability, tenderness, the need for connection. And because they won't acknowledge these needs, they experience them as external threats. They attract emotional partners and then resent them. They feel contempt for people who express feelings openly. They build walls so high that eventually they wonder why they feel so isolated, so disconnected, so unable to experience genuine intimacy. Their rebellion isn't to become emotional. It's to stop pretending they're not already deeply affected by things they claim don't matter. To integrate their vulnerability instead of weaponizing rationality against it. This is the pattern Jung saw everywhere. The thing you judge most harshly in others is almost always the thing you've rejected most violently in yourself. Your irritation is a map, your contempt is a compass. Whatever you find yourself reacting to with disproportionate intensity is showing you exactly where your shadow is hiding. So here's the practice of rebellion. Start watching your reactions. When someone irritates you intensely, ask yourself, what quality in them am I refusing to see in myself? When you feel moral superiority toward someone else's flaws, ask, how do I commit this same sin in a form I've found acceptable? When you find yourself making the same excuse for the 1,000th time, ask, what truth am I avoiding by maintaining this story? These questions are not comfortable. They're designed to crack open your defenses, to force you to see that the enemy has never been external circumstances or other people or bad luck or timing. The enemy has been your own refusal to become conscious, your own commitment to maintaining the persona at all costs. And here's where Jung's insight becomes genuinely revolutionary. The moment you stop fighting your shadow and start integrating it, your entire life changes. Not because external circumstances shift, but because you stop being at war with yourself. The energy you've been using to repress, deny, and avoid suddenly becomes available for creation, for genuine growth, for actual living. Think about how much energy you expend maintaining your image, carefully curating what you say, monitoring how others perceive you, suppressing reactions that don't fit your self-concept, rationalizing behaviors that contradict your ideals. It's exhausting. And that exhaustion is why your life feels so heavy, why meaning feels so elusive. Because you're not actually living, you're managing a performance. The rebellion is to stop managing, to stop curating, to stop performing, to stand in the full truth of who you are, contradictions and all, and declare, this is me. Not the edited version, not the aspirational version, the actual, messy, complicated, sometimes magnificent and sometimes petty human being underneath all the pretense. And when you do this, something extraordinary happens. The people who are attracted to your persona start falling away. The situations that reinforced your false self stop working. Everything that was built on the lie starts crumbling. And this feels like death, because it is death, the death of the identity you thought was you. But on the other side of that, death is birth, the emergence of your actual self, the version of you that doesn't need external validation because it's no longer performing for an audience. The version that doesn't need to find meaning because it's busy creating it through the simple act of existing authentically. This is the rebellion Jung demands. Not against society or systems or other people. Against your own dishonesty. Against every lie you've told yourself to make your imprisonment comfortable. Against the voice that says you need to wait, to prepare, to become worthy before you're allowed to be real. That voice is the enemy. And what comes next will show you exactly how it's kept you trapped. And why the final truth, the one we've been building toward, is the only thing powerful enough to break its hold forever. Imagine standing at the center of your life right now. Strip away every distraction, every excuse, every story you've been telling yourself about why things are the way they are. Just you and the raw truth of your existence. In that silence, one question emerges with devastating clarity. What if the meaning you've been searching for your entire life isn't something you find, but something you create through the act of becoming conscious? This is it, the final revelation, the one Jung spent decades trying to help people see. And it's so simple, so obvious, that most people miss it entirely. They're looking for meaning as if it's a treasure buried somewhere, a secret code to crack, a cosmic purpose to discover. But Jung is telling you something radically different. The meaning of your life is the process of becoming whole. Not successful, not enlightened, not perfect, whole. Wholeness means integrating every fragmented part of yourself, the persona you show the world and the shadow you've hidden, the conscious beliefs you claim and the unconscious programs that actually run you, the wounds you carry and the potential you've denied. It means bringing consciousness to everything inside you that's been operating in darkness. It means becoming fully, completely, uncomfortably yourself. This is why your struggles exist. Not as punishment, not as obstacles, as invitations. Every repeated pattern is your unconscious trying to get your attention. Every emotional wound that won't heal is pointing to something you must understand. Every fear that keeps returning is showing you exactly where your growth is waiting. Your life isn't happening to you. It's happening for you, pushing you, forcing you, sometimes dragging you toward the wholeness you're meant to achieve. Jung called this process individuation, and he was absolutely clear this is the central task of human existence, not building a career, not accumulating achievements, not even finding happiness. Your primary purpose, the only purpose that matters, is to become the person you actually are instead of the person you were programmed to be. Think about what this means. Right now, you're a collection of fragments. The child who learned to hide certain emotions, the teenager who constructed defenses against rejection, the adult who performs roles to gain approval. Each of these versions of you made sense at the time. They helped you survive. But you're still carrying them, still letting them make decisions, still allowing them to limit what you believe is possible. Individuation is the process of gathering these fragments and integrating them into a unified self, not by rejecting the past versions of you, but by understanding why they formed, honoring what they protected, and consciously choosing whether they still serve you. It's the difference between being haunted by your history and being informed by it. Here's where this becomes genuinely revolutionary. When you commit to becoming whole, your relationship with meaning changes completely. You stop asking, "What is my purpose?" because you realize that question is a trap. It assumes meaning is external, waiting to be discovered. But meaning is internal. It's generated moment by moment through your willingness to be conscious, to be authentic, to participate fully in your own becoming. Every time you confront a fear, instead of avoiding it, you create meaning. Every time you speak your truth instead of performing what's expected, you create meaning. Every time you integrate a denied part of yourself, instead of continuing to hide it, you create meaning. Meaning isn't something you chase. It's something you build through the daily act of refusing to be unconscious. The psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz, who studied Jung's work deeply, put it this way: meaning reveals itself in the small, consistent acts of self-honesty you practice every day, not in dramatic breakthroughs, not in mystical experiences, in moments when you choose truth over comfort, responsibility over blame, growth over stagnation. The path appears under your feet as you walk it. This is why Jung said that individuation is not for the faint-hearted, because it requires you to sacrifice everything that's kept you safe. Your persona, the mask that wins approval. Your defenses, the strategies that protect you from pain. Your illusions, key comforting stories about who you are and why things happen. All of it must be examined, dismantled, and rebuilt on a foundation of truth instead of fear. And here's the part that makes this truly terrifying. You cannot individuate without disappointing people. When you stop performing the roles others expect, they will react. Your family might be hurt that you're no longer the person who always sacrifices for them. Your friends might feel betrayed that you're no longer available to maintain dynamics that kept you small. Your culture might reject you for refusing to pursue the markers of success it demands. This is inevitable because authenticity threatens every system built on unconsciousness. Nobody gives you that permission. You have to take it. And taking it means accepting that you will lose people, opportunities, and identities you thought were essential. But what you gain is everything: your soul, your vitality, your capacity for genuine connection, and finally a life that feels like it belongs to you. So, the final truth, the one that changes everything, is this. Your life becomes meaningful the moment you decide to live it consciously. Not someday when you figure everything out, not after you achieve some external validation. Right now, this moment, by choosing to see what you've been avoiding, to feel what you've been numbing, to speak what you've been silencing, to become what you've been denying. Consciousness is the answer. Not happiness, not success, not comfort. Consciousness, the willingness to look directly at your life, your patterns, your wounds, your potential and say, I see this. I take responsibility for this. I will no longer blame circumstances or other people or my past. This is my life, and I will participate in it fully. When you do this, when you commit to becoming conscious, everything shifts. Not externally. Externally, your life might get harder before it gets easier. But internally, you experience something you may have never felt before. Freedom. The freedom of no longer being controlled by forces you don't understand. The freedom of making choices from your actual center rather than from fear or conditioning. The freedom of existing as yourself rather than as a performance. And here's what Jung discovered about people who achieve this. They stop searching for meaning because they're too busy creating it. Every interaction becomes an opportunity for authenticity. Every challenge becomes material for growth. Every day becomes a chance to bring more of themselves into conscious existence. They're not trying to be special. They're not trying to be enlightened. They're simply being real. And that realness radiates meaning in ways that no external achievement ever could. This is why Jung said that the psyche has a religious function, not religious in the sense of organized belief, but religious in the original meaning, to reconnect the conscious and unconscious, to reconnect the individual and the universal, to reconnect you with the totality of who you are. When that reconnection happens, you experience what Jung called the numinous, a sense that your existence is participating in something larger than itself, not because you've found God or enlightenment, but because you've finally found yourself. So here we are, at the end of this exploration. And the question facing you now is the only question that matters. What step toward your true self are you ready to take today? Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Today, because readiness is a myth. You'll never feel ready to confront your shadow, to dismantle your persona, to disappoint the people who expect you to remain small. But the alternative, continuing to live unconsciously, continuing to let invisible forces control your existence, continuing to betray yourself in exchange for safety, that alternative is soul death. Jung said that the moment a person begins to seek meaning consciously, the entire psyche conspires to help them individuate. Your dreams become more vivid, offering guidance. Your intuitions become sharper, pointing the way. Your experiences begin to align, creating the exact circumstances you need for growth. Not because the universe is magical, but because once you start paying attention, you notice what was always there. This is your path, not someone else's, not the one you were told to follow, yours. The one that emerges when you finally stop running from yourself. The one that reveals itself through your struggles, your desires, your fears, your potential. The one that's been waiting your entire life for you to stop performing and start existing. Your life has meaning right now, not someday. Now, the meaning is the process of uncovering who you actually are beneath every layer of conditioning, every protective strategy, every lie you've told yourself to make your imprisonment bearable. The meaning is the journey from unconsciousness to consciousness, from fragmentation to wholeness, from performance to authenticity. And it begins the moment you decide to stop lying. To yourself, about yourself. The moment you choose truth over comfort. The moment you commit to becoming real instead of remaining safe. Jung left you with this gift, a map through the darkness, a way to understand your struggles, not as failures, but as invitations, a framework for transforming your pain into purpose. But the map doesn't walk itself. You have to walk it, one honest moment at a time, one integrated shadow at a time, one act of courage at a time. This is the meaning of your life. Not waiting to be found, waiting to be lived.